Job-related auto accident injuries. That's our topic for today, and my guest is South Carolina attorney George Sink. George, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Cindy?
Very good. Well, George, I know that you handle all kinds of personal injury cases, but I've heard that one kind of case that you handle is particularly complex, and that is this area of job-related auto accident injuries.
This is a fascinating area, and the big idea to keep in mind is workers' compensation, which would be a job injury, relates to permanent injuries most of the time. So you look for permanent injuries. Auto, you can have almost any sort of injury, something that hopefully will go away in a little while, which is not permanent. And so if you're on the job driving a car and you're in an auto collision, you have to do some quick sorting. It takes a little bit of thought to decide which case or both to pursue.
So when you say which case to pursue, then what you're talking about is there is, am I correct, a case relevant to your employment and being hurt on the job, but there's a second case because of the auto accident?
Absolutely. And that's a 50-50 proposition. In South Carolina, if you're in an auto collision and it's your fault, let's say you run into the rear of someone, you can't bring a claim against that person you hit. You can, but you cannot recover. But if you were on the job and you're going to the store to pick up something and you run in the rear of somebody, you can bring successfully a workers' compensation claim if you have the right injuries for that accident.
What exactly does that mean to bring a claim?
What that means was, in the history of the development of the legislative structure, which we now call workers' compensation law, in exchange for a worker's right to bring a claim to get money for an injury they sustained on the job, they had to give up their right to sue their employer. So now, instead of going to the courts, they go to a legislative mandated system of recovery for injuries which occur on the job. So accidental injuries on the job, you go to this legislative structure, and they call it workers' compensation. Otherwise, you're free to use the courts if it's not on the job. So you gave up your right to sue your employer in almost every case. If they came up and hit you in the head with a baseball bat deliberately, that would fall outside the scope of that naturally. But in general, you can't sue your employers.
Suppose I have an employee and that employee rear ends somebody else. So he's at fault, but he's injured. Is it widely known by employees that they have a claim?
They would have a claim against you and your business. The insurance company who insures the workers' compensation for that business would pay. If they were waiting at the light and someone hit them in the rear, it wasn't their fault. They have an automobile claim, a tort claim against that person who hit them in the rear, and if they're seriously injured, they have a workers' compensation claim. How those two work together is fascinating. The big thing to watch is you can't settle your auto claim while the comp claim is pending, because there's interacting liens. The workers' comp system has a right to get money back from you if you recover from the auto claim to pay for weekly pay and other medical bills that the workers' compensation system would probably pay for while you're recovering. So they have an interaction that's sort of complicated.
I would think that the average person would not understand this at all.
They don't, and it's fun to educate them. And usually the people that come trust us, so we're able to do it very easily. And we tell them what to do. We guide them gently through the system. We have them file the right forms for workers' compensation, bring the right claims for the auto accident. And the big thing is the chemistry between those two. How do you handle it? For example, if you had a serious auto accident while you're on the job, the workers' compensation system says you have to use the employer's doctors, the ones the system prescribes. So you start off with them, and if you're not happy with them, you can get your own doctors outside of that system, but you have to pay for them. So it's sort of complicated, and you have to balance the costs, keep track of all that, but eventually it all works out. But these systems are interrelated in a way that could be confusing to the ordinary person. So it gives me some joy to explain it to them, because it does work out well in the end, but it's a little bit of a confusion in the middle. It's usually it's tougher in workers' compensation because the statutes are just what they are. You have to comply with them. It has to be noticed within a certain amount of time. You have to do this. You have to check the right box in this form and that form. So it's very precise. On the auto, it's a little easier, but the interrelationship between those two is, I'd say, very difficult for anyone except a trained lawyer to understand.
Well, George, if somebody needs more information in South Carolina, they've been in a work related accident and they need somebody to help them, how can they reach you?
Oh, we'd be glad to talk to them if they called 1-800-849-SINK, SINK, or they can find us on our website at www.sinklaw.com. We're here available all hours of the day and night, so please feel free to call, and we're delighted to talk to anybody who has any questions.
Very good. George, thanks so much.
Thank you, Cindy.
Until next time, this is Cindy Speaker for State Law TV.